I try to just take it and roll with it because although I use disabled, I use disability, I don't feel the need to say differently abled or avoid the word disability or anything. That's just me personally. I know there are a lot of people who can be more offended or upset when the terms differently abled are used. I feel like a lot of people use those terms not trying to upset anyone and really just trying to be more inclusive, but don't understand that disability is not a bad word.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the latest installment of the Nick Speaks podcast, the podcast dedicated to the disability community where we speak up, speak out, and speak loud about the issues that matter to the disabled the most. I'm your host, Nick Comstock. You guys, I am so glad that you're joining me today on this Tuesday. We have an incredible guest as always. You guys know that I think all my guests are incredible, but you know what? This one I think is exceptionally special because I am talking with a young woman today who went in for mental help when she was 21 years of age and came out, unfortunately, physically disabled on top of her mental health problems. And instead of being bitter, instead of being angry, which I'm sure she was all that at one point, she has turned that into disability with Aspen Sage. And we're going to talk about that and so much more. Would you please help me welcome Aspen to Nick Speaks? Aspen, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing well, doing well. So, Aspen, I am so glad that you're here with me today. And my producer reached out to me with your information, and we just had the opportunity to do a pre-call yesterday. Your story to me is heartbreaking and so inspiring at the same time. And I know people with disabilities don't like to use the term inspiration because we're already looked at as inspiration porn. But your story really is inspiring for someone like me who's had a disability his entire life. And to hear what you went through is just incredible, and how you've turned it around is incredible. So why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself and maybe a little bit about your life before disability, and then we'll get into how that happened and how you're handling it and what you're doing for the disabled community.
Absolutely. And thank you for your kind words. I really appreciate them because it definitely hasn't been an easy journey. But before everything, I was a very busy person. I worked multiple full-time jobs. I was going to school. I worked in education and I was running a full-time spa product business. A very busy person, and honestly, I'm still just as busy, but in different ways now. But in 2021, I experienced a trauma that led me to ask for help for the first time in my life. I was struggling mentally and I tried to end my life. And at that time, I got put in a hospital where they were putting me on many different medications. And unfortunately, I ended up having an adverse reaction to a medication that ended up leaving me paralyzed. So, with that, I've kind of just tried to grow from that, and it definitely hasn't been easy, but that's kind of the route we're just trying to take because sometimes we're thrown a lot of different things into our life that we're not quite expecting, but
Yeah, and that is so sad to hear you say that because a lot of people struggle with mental health, myself included. And, you know, a lot of us who do, we're afraid to go get help. Number one, because of the stigmatism that is behind it, and because you're automatically deemed as crazy and all this type of stuff. And then when you try to go get help for something that most people would just ignore and try to substitute with alcohol or food, whatever the case may be, you said, and I applaud you for it, no, this is too much for me to handle. I'm going to go get help. And the people that were supposed to help you ended up hurting you in more ways, in a way that you have never been able to recover from physically. How, when you found out that you were going to be paralyzed the rest of your life and confined to a wheelchair, how were those first few days, first few months, first year? How was that for you?
Honestly, terrifying. It has not been an easy journey. And when I was first injured, I was surrounded by nurses and a doctor who didn't believe me and who told me that I could leave the hospital when I could walk out, and I've never walked a day in my life since. And so at the time I wasn't quite sure how I felt. I didn't know what to expect. I didn't understand what was going on because my situation is so unheard of, but it took me a long time, multiple years to even accept the position that I'm in now. And I was struggling mentally, I was struggling physically, emotionally, with everything because not only did I lose my mental health, I lost my physical health, I lost multiple jobs, I couldn't continue going to school, I lost the relationship that I was in, and I lost my dog who was my best friend at the time. And so I felt like it was just so much loss over and over again while surrounded by so many people who either didn't want to help me or didn't know how to help me. And it's been so emotional. So coming home, and I was living in an RV before my injury, and when I came home, I was paralyzed from the neck down, and so I had to come home and move back into my parents' house because I couldn't do anything for myself. And so I went in asking for help and then really had my whole life flipped upside down. So it definitely wasn't easy, and it's taken many years to get to the place that I'm in now.
Yeah, I can't imagine what that's been like. I've been in a wheelchair my entire life, Aspen. And one of the things that my mom would tell me is that, Nick, you need to get to know some of the men in our church that are in wheelchairs. And I really struggled with that because I would look at them and I say, Mom, all those men at one point, they could walk, they could do everything on their own. And one day they had that ability stolen away from them. And I don't know how to connect with those people because I can't say I understand you because I don't know what it's like to have something and then have it jerked away from me like that, especially that much freedom. So, yeah, I mean, I can get with you now on the doctor's appointments are crazy. My spasms are nuts and all that. I can get with you now, but as far as, you know, you being 21 and being into cosmetics, like you said yesterday, and having all these jobs and really kicking ass in life, and then having all it taken away from you at once. I can't fathom that. I can try, but it's just very hard for me to fathom. Um, so we'll touch on this briefly because we talked about it yesterday. So you said yesterday that it was because of a medication that you were given and you had a adverse reaction. And yeah, and I'm bringing this up because we're going to talk about medical power of attorney in a minute, and I want to stress how important it is to have that. Um, you said you were given a medication and you had an adverse reaction to it. Didn't you say you were paralyzed for 24 hours at first?
So the first time that I took the medication, it was between 24 and 48 hours that I was paralyzed.
Okay.
And then I was fortunate enough to be able to relearn how to walk. I remember there was like grab bars on the side of the wall in the hospital, and I was able to use that bar to help me relearn to walk. And then I ended up taking the medication a second time because they told me they were going to give me a lower dose of the medication and I wouldn't have the same reaction, even though this medication was already listed as an allergy on my chart. And after I took that medication, even it being a smaller dose, I have not regained function or mobility, anything from the waist down.
Wow. Now, when you took the medication the first time, how long after you took the medication was the adverse reaction?
So it was within that day. It was within probably less than an hour of taking the medication. It can be hard to recall just because of trauma brain, but I know it was within the hour of the onset of the medication.
My God. And you told them, you were like, I don't want to take this medication again.
Right. They were being very pushy on medication, just saying that I needed to find the right medication that would work for me. And they basically gave me no choice. Even though it was listed as an allergy on my chart, they still were like, you're going to take this.
And because you told me yesterday, because you were in the mental hospital, that stigmatism kicked in. And they already thought because you were there that you're not in your right mind anyway. And
Right.
your your parents, you know, you were 21 at the time. They didn't have a medical power of attorney over you, um, which is scary, which is why I want to bring how important it is to have a medical power of attorney. What do you have to say to that now that you've had this experience?
Yeah, so I was 21 at the time. I was fully capable of caring for myself and being independent, working and driving myself. And at the time, I was in a mental health hospital and I didn't have anyone but myself to speak for myself. And because I was in mental health, they didn't want to listen to me. And since I've been released from the hospital, my mother does have medical power of attorney over me,
Good.
whether it's mental health related or physical health, and I can't speak for myself. I feel like it's so important to always have someone who's willing to speak for you and be a voice when you can't be for yourself, because this was in a time COVID was at its peak. We couldn't have visitation. I couldn't see my family other than through a window.
Mhm.
And the nurses and doctor wouldn't listen to my mom, even trying to talk to them on the phone because I was a legal adult. And since I was in mental health, they had so much say over my care.
You know, that's interesting because maybe it's because I've had a disability my whole life, but even with my mom, because my mom is not my medical power of attorney, I have someone else in my family as my medical power of attorney. In fact, I need to redo it because neither one of us can find it. So I have to redo a fresh copy. And your story has made me really want to redo it. And but it's been interesting because I've been in the hospital several times and I'm 35. And, you know, as long as I tell them, hey, as long as my mom is my emergency contact, or at least one of my emergency contacts, they've always talked to her, you know. So that's Weird. I mean, was your mom even your emergency contact?
Oh, absolutely. I had both my parents as my emergency contact, and I've even had a situation since when before my mom had medical power of attorney where I went into anaphylaxis from contrast dye and started having seizures, and I wasn't at a hospital where I was having the MRIs done. It was an outpatient facility, and when they got there with the ambulance, my mom was trying to let them know, like, hey, she has seizures, she's probably going to have seizures, and they wouldn't listen to her at all because she didn't have that medical power of attorney at the time. So even though she was my emergency contact, they would not listen to a word she had to say.
What the hell? I've never experienced that. It must be the people in your state because I I dear God. I mean,
Yeah.
I know my parents and we've had our times where I haven't had the best relationship with them, but they would climb over a wall. I mean, they're Christians and they're pretty much heavy in their belief. But I guarantee you, my dad especially, he might say some words that aren't really found in the Bible. Um, if somebody told my mother, especially my mother is really high strung, and oh my gosh, I just can't even imagine being in that situation and ambulance drivers looking at my mom saying, no, you can't have any information. They've never told my mom that. I've always been an adult. So, wow. Do you really think it was because you were in the mental hospital?
So I do think there is a large stigma forever on my health records
Sure.
that has to do with me going in for mental help, which is very frustrating because I don't think they should never hold that over someone's head. Like, they should be grateful that someone was willing to ask for help. Um, but this was a completely outpatient, MRI, and so I don't know if they just thought they were doing what was best and strapping me in and taking me right to the ER, but you would think, like, we weren't even sure originally if they were going to send me to the hospital. So I mean, I would hope that they would listen, and they just didn't.
I I'm sitting here pissed for you, and this is exactly why we I do this program, and I'm so glad that you're here because I'm sure, Aspen, that you're not the only one that has been through this. Believe it or not, as hard as it would seem to believe, something worse has probably happened to somebody else, and I hope by listening to this episode or watching this episode today that if you have a similar story like hers, please reach out to me so we can bring awareness to this. I mean, this can happen. I mean, before this, you didn't have a disability, and wow, this is insane. Okay, so you now are accepting, let's maybe go a year down the road. You now are accepting, okay, or maybe you haven't accepted it yet. I don't know. But you've been kind of forced to say, this is where I am. So, where did the disability with Aspen Sage come into play?
So I started accessibility with Aspen
Oh,
Sage.
accessibility. Sorry.
You are just fine. I started that shortly after I started regaining hand and arm movement. So in November 2021, I actually ended up with COVID. And as unfortunate as that was, I was unable to keep any medication I was on down. I was very, very ill. And although I couldn't keep any of my medications down after not having medication in my system for quite a few days, I slowly started regaining hand and arm movement. due to not having those medications in my system. And so after I started regaining hand movement, arm function, I was like, well, I clearly am unable to work for multiple reasons. I'm having seizures, I'm paralyzed, I can't drive, I pass out. I have a long list of symptoms, but I needed to find a purpose. And so my purpose ended up being sharing my story. And so shortly after November 2021, I started blogging and then eventually switching to social media like Instagram and Facebook, and really not knowing where it was going to lead me. But I was sharing my story originally just about my medical journey, but later to switch the perspective and just share my experiences as a young person in a wheelchair, whether that was an accessible hotel room or a restaurant that wasn't accessible, just sharing those experiences and showing others with disabilities that although something tragic and traumatic can happen, you can still live such a fulfilled life and you can still surround yourself with so much beauty. And although it was really hard and I was still struggling quite a bit mentally, I still wanted to show people that like life doesn't have to end after you become disabled and after you start relying on a wheelchair or another mobility aid. And I just want to encourage people to just get out there, whether that's traveling to another state, another country, or even just a park down the street. It's still possible when you have the right support system.
Yeah, yeah. So I want to talk to you about that because I have followed a couple different people from Oklahoma on social media, and I have heard that Oklahoma benefits for people with disabilities as far as like caregiving and things like that. It's not really that great. Can you attest to that? Like, do you get 24-hour care or how does that work?
The state is a mess as a whole. I will say no. The support here is it's rough. The medical system as a whole is wrecked, but getting appropriate care here is so hard. Of course, originally I was told that I could still live completely independently, and they were telling me that when I was paralyzed from the neck down and wasn't doing a single thing for myself. And so, no, my parents did become my full-time caretakers, and they weren't getting paid a penny for it. Um, the problem is there are so many different resources that the government makes hard to even be aware of. And so I am fortunate to have a part-time caretaker now. But no, I don't receive 24/7 care, and I don't need it at this point. I definitely needed it back then and was receiving it. My family was just doing it because that's what you do when someone in your family goes through something so traumatic. But no, my there was no way my mom could have worked because she was doing everything full time, and my dad was doing everything full time on his days off while he was still working a full time job. So although I do have certain resources now, no one no one made me aware of those resources when I left the hospital because they didn't believe that my disability was real.
Wow. And you never walked out of that hospital. You rolled out of it in a wheelchair. How long
Correct.
how long after you were paralyzed did you leave the hospital?
So it felt like a lot longer than it was, but I think it was a right out a week. Um, they kept me in the mental health facility that was not accessible while also being surrounded by nurses and techs who didn't want to lift me because they didn't believe me and thought that I was just extremely mentally ill. And
Oh,
so they actually had physical therapy coming up to work with me, and my parents were trying to fight to get me out of the hospital. They made my parents go through like a physical therapy course to learn how to care for their daughter, although they were not even properly taking care of me in the hospital.
You know what? I don't think I've said what the hell this much in an episode. Your your story is just ugh. I hate the medical
Yeah,
system. Um,
I'm with you there.
Jeez, oh Pete. I mean, so they didn't lift you because they didn't believe you.
They would lift me because they were having to take me to the bathroom, but if I didn't hear, they were complaining the whole time. Like, and especially because I would be in like my private room, I was just like, it's just insane what these people are getting away with. They just didn't believe, they didn't believe me.
But when you were there, because when people think mental hospital, they think the craziest of the crazies are there. So people are screaming, cursing, blah, blah, all the things. So were you doing any of those things that would make them be like, oh, yeah, she's absolutely.
I was very emotional at the time, to be understood. But other than that, like I was being completely compliant with everything they would ask of me. I had a lot of food allergies and they weren't super accommodating to my food allergies.
Oh,
And
my God.
so they did try to say that I had like an eating disorder, but I've never had an eating disorder in my whole life. I have celiac disease, which means I can't have gluten and wheat, and I also have soy sensitivity, and so I can't have soy. And they weren't fully accommodating that, or they'd send things and then it have something with wheat or wheat, gluten, soy, or something of that form, and then they would accuse me of having an eating disorder because I wasn't eating those items.
Because you
But
didn't you didn't want to die.
yeah, I wasn't trying to have more of a reaction to anything. But not only that, when I was originally paralyzed from the neck down, I wasn't able to feed myself. And so I did have, I think one of the techs was willing to like blend some food for me that I drank through a straw, but it was horrible.
I mean, I know COVID was screwing up the whole hospital system at the time, which is probably why. I mean, I would hope that in a normal instance where the world isn't shut down, that somebody would not get this type of care. Oh my
Right.
God. I just oh okay.
But we can move past the medical stuff because I am in a lot better position now that I'm away from that chaos.
Yeah, oh, I'm sure. I'm flabbergasted. So we'll definitely move away because my blood pressure goes any higher. Yeah. Um
We don't need that.
that's just mind-boggling. So you started accessibility with Aspen Sage. Let's go back to that. And you said I want to show people um I want to show people that it's possible, even though that I've been given a pile of shit. I'm going to show people that it's possible to live an as normal life as possible. What made you say that after all the hell that you've been through?
I have always been a lover of travel, and the one consistent that I've had in my life, and the one thing that I feel like, other than my family, that I just haven't lost is my ability to travel. And although travel does look different and it is more difficult and there's more planning that goes into it, it's still possible, and that's where my heart was. And I needed something to live for because
Yeah.
living for doctor's appointments wasn't it for me. I didn't see the purpose in that. It didn't give me the motivation to just get up and live life. And so having a trip planned helped me get through those hard days, hard weeks, hard months. And I wanted to keep traveling the world and seeing new places and just encouraging people to not just live for those appointments and just get out and actually enjoy life and don't just live for those hard days. Like find something positive and uplifting, and travel was that for me.
That's awesome. I had a good friend of mine tell me that I should join TikTok in 2021, and that really changed my life. And it's one of the reasons I'm here today with the podcast, is because I've been told I'm unemployable because of my disability by 2 states and 3 different counties, which is not true. People are just not willing to look outside the cookie cutter. And I'm sure you've experienced that now that you're disabled. But even though, because I know you said you can't work a couple different times, did you still think that working was a possibility at some point, even though you have all this stuff going on?
So I think when I was originally released from the hospital, I wasn't quite sure what anything looked like. And my job actually waited quite a while before actually laying me off because I feel like they really did want me to come back. And I'll forever be grateful for them holding my position as long as they did, because it definitely wasn't a position I wanted to give up. And now I still am not sure. Like, I don't know what the future holds. I just know how important advocacy is for me. And so I think the right opportunities will come at the right time, even if they don't feel quite like the right time for me.
Yeah,
Um, but really, like everything I'm doing now is just to benefit other people and even help myself in a way. It's kind of therapeutic, um, just to share my experiences and connect with other people. But right now, I think focusing on my health, mental, physical, figuring out my seizures. I think my seizures are probably the biggest thing from stopping me from being so much more successful, because I can't even consider learning to drive until I'm at least 6 months seizure free, and I haven't even went 6 weeks seizure free since I've started having them. And so between my seizures and my pain and my fatigue and just some other symptoms that I experience, I know work will always look different for me, but I'm really happy with my advocacy journey right now.
that's awesome. So you're on Social Security disability. Um,
I
I've
am.
I've talked about um, how hard it is to live on that shoestring. How hard is it for you? Is the amount of money that you make? You don't have to say it if you don't want to. Is the amount of money that you make? Are you able to at least live a little bit comfortably, or how is this working for you?
So I definitely don't think social security of any sort is, I lost my words. That's the brain fog. Um, I definitely don't think social security in any way is a livable income wage. I am lucky to have the support system that I have who make it doable for me, but it's really not a livable wage. And so a lot of people aren't aware. Like they'll see that I'm traveling and going places, but they're unaware that 90% of the trips that I go on are in some sort of collaboration. So I'm working with other companies, businesses, and travel organizations of some sort to be able to go on those comped trips. So maybe I'm paying a little bit out of pocket, but I'm not paying for everything out of pocket. And
Right.
I would not be able to travel like I do if it wasn't for the collaborations that I work with. And so
That's awesome. And I bet you feel a little bit more freedom when they call you and say, "Hey, can you do this trip?" Does that make you feel maybe the wrong terminology is a little bit more normal, or how does that make you feel when somebody says, "We saw you on social media. We want you to take a trip on our behalf and tell us what you think about it." How does that make you feel?
I definitely wouldn't say it makes me feel normal, but I definitely feel more seen. Um, like more that what I'm doing is actually serving a purpose and reaching a broader community. And of course, like my health always comes first. That's just part of my life, part of being on disability is no matter what, my health has to come first because I can't do all the things that a lot of people can do. And even just a paraplegic who doesn't really have other symptoms, there are so many people who are in wheelchairs full time who are able to work a full time job, but it looks different for every person with a disability. And so when I do have people reach out to me, whether that's a phone call or email, it's a reminder to me that what I'm doing is serving a purpose, and it might seem so small to me, but it could be so large to someone else. And so I'm always just really grateful when I meet new people and hear how they found me, or if they're interested in collaborating in any sort. I'm always open to that.
That's cool. Sorry, I had a muscle spasm right there.
You're fine.
Handicap problems, you know. Uh, what was your first What was your first post that people saw you and just went wow, and it started to really change things for you as far
See,
as that?
that's honestly really hard to say because I feel like I just started posting consistently because I've always been kind of aware of social media. I ran a spa product business prior to my injury that
Mhm.
had a pretty decent social media following on it. That obviously went away after my injury. That's something else that I had to give up, but I've always been kind of aware of social media, and so I just knew I needed to start posting consistently. And I really don't feel like there's been just one post that really took off. I have had many posts that do take off, and a lot of them usually end up involving my service dog because she's beautiful. But other than that, I just knew like I was gonna start posting consistently and seeing who was interested, and then I just took it and kind of rolled with it.
Yeah, yeah. Wow, this is so awesome and inspiring for me. Just to hear you tell your story. So let me ask you, as someone who's been disabled since 2021, in the disability community, there's been a movement. There is a movement to water things down. Um, and what I mean by that is not using the word disabled, not using the word disability, but rather use phrases like differently abled, or I don't have disabilities, I have abilities or different abilities. What do you feel? How do you feel about the language shift?
So personally, I try to always not be offended with who I'm talking to because I feel like everyone is easily offended in this day. And so
Mm-hmm.
I just try to understand more of the person that I'm talking to. And as long as I don't feel like they're coming off and trying to be offensive, I try to just take it and roll with it because although I use disabled, I use disability, I don't feel the need to say differently abled or avoid the word disability or anything. That's just me personally. I know there are a lot of people who can be more offended or upset when the terms differently abled are used. I feel like a lot of people use those terms not trying to upset anyone and really just trying to be more inclusive, but don't understand that like disability is not a bad word. Like it's okay to use that, and I think it's just the education behind it.
Mm. Yeah. I have said recently in a couple different programs that I feel that we need parents and people with disabilities alike to come in and teach the generation, especially if they have disabled kids, this is what my son or daughter's disability is, and this is how it affects them. No, it's not contagious because a lot of young kids, that's why they're afraid of kids with disabilities because they're like, oh, they have a disability or they're sick, and they're not sick. They just have a disability, and they think sometimes they can catch it, like it's contagious. And so I feel like there needs to be a lot of awareness in the schools as to what certain disabilities are and all that sort. Um, have you gone into schools to talk to young kids yet? Is that a plan for you or?
Absolutely. That's actually one of my favorite volunteer opportunities to do because I worked in education prior to my injury, so I know of multiple people in local schools. And so one of my favorite things to do is to just work in the classrooms or speak to a different group of kids, whether it's usually early childhood education because those are the teachers that I was close with because that's who I worked with. But I definitely think it's important because like everyone deserves to have a friend, and we shouldn't be looked at different no matter what our age is, um, and what our disability is, because we all deserve to have people who are loving, caring, and supportive in our life. And like the kid in the wheelchair and the kid with crutches, like they absolutely deserve to have friends and be included and not feel like the outcast. And so I'm all about speaking to the schools, speaking to kids, and bringing my service dog in and doing service dog education. I love to be in the schools. So anytime I have the opportunity or a little extra energy, I try to get there.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I want to talk about since your disability, since the onset of it, how has maintaining and how has maintaining friendships been, and how has making new ones been? Because we talked a little bit about it yesterday, and I talk about it often on this program that, me having a friendship as a person with a disability with a able-bodied person has been really difficult for me. And one of the stigmatisms that I think people with physical or mental disabilities have is that we only want to be around people that are in our bubble. And that's not true. So how has friendship changed for you after disability?
That's definitely a great topic to touch on because it's definitely different for everyone. I will say when I was first injured and first released from the hospital, I had an outpour of love and support from friends and family and community of people around that I never knew, and the support was incredible. But I will say that people thought that I was going to get better. And although I've gotten better in ways, I'm chronically ill, and that's what my life is going to look like. And so there's a difference between just being sick and getting better and then being disabled and chronically ill because that's long term, lifelong. And so at first people were incredibly supportive, and I didn't really lose many friends at all, but then that quickly shifted when people began become aware that this is long term.
Yeah, it's
And
not going to change.
right. And so I did lose a lot of people. and not in a way that was super like them saying we're not going to be your friend now that you're disabled. It's just them kind of like dwindling off and doing their own thing with life. But also I did have people who straight up told me like we don't want to continue this friendship because you're unable to drive. I can't drive and I live 45 minutes from town. And so I either rely on someone to take me somewhere or I rely on someone to pick me up. And losing that freedom and independence makes the friendships fade off too. And so I did lose friends. Most were kind of just dwindling off on their own. And then some were more obvious and stated they couldn't be friends with someone who's disabled, which is still crazy to me. Um, but then on the positive side, I've made incredible friends. I'm still friends with some of my able-bodied friends that I knew prior to my injury. I've made new able-bodied friends, but I've also made friends with people who have similar conditions to me or completely different conditions and who are also disabled. And so, although I did lose a lot of people that I thought I would have in my life forever, I've made some incredible friends throughout being new to disability as well.
Yeah. Well, I would say to those people that that said we can't be friends with you because of your disabilities, that's just asinine. They're an asshole, and I'll keep this as clean as I can. Screw off. I mean,
Yeah,
that's just that's they they weren't trained right, and I don't believe that they were your friends in the first place. If they say to you, well, now that you're not able to drive and go hang out with us and be cool like us, we can't be your friends. I don't believe they were your friends in the first place.
I agree with you. I think that's actually something I could say is I think becoming disabled has just really taught me who my true friends and family are. And the ones who weren't ever meant to be, they can go do their own thing and I do wish them the best, but I'm grateful for the people who have come into my life and the people who have stuck around during the hardest times of my life.
Now, when she says, I do wish them the best, that basically means F you.
Oh no, no. I truly from the bottom of my heart wish people well, even the ones who have done me completely wrong.
Yeah, I'm sure you do. That's my personality. I wish you the best, but really, F you. Okay, so let's talk about because one of the biggest things with people with disabilities is dating. So before you were disabled, you were in a relationship. It was a bad breakup, and that was one of the reasons you were really struggling. Did you ever think you would be in another romantic relationship again?
So, at the time of my hospitalization, I definitely did not think that I would ever be in a relationship again. Once I got into my injury a little bit and realized like this is more permanent, I definitely like knew it would be more challenging, but I wouldn't ever say I was like, yeah, I'm never doing that again. I think it took healing from previous traumas and going through that healing process, learning to not only accept myself, but learning to love myself in a way I didn't think I would ever have to do. And after I went through that self healing and self growth, I knew that I was worthy of the right relationship. And although it's different and although it's hard, I do know that it's still possible. And I would always encourage people to just find themselves to the fullest capacity that they can before trying to pursue someone else. But I also don't think you need to be fully healed because I feel like with the right person you can still be learning to love yourself and grow while also learning to love someone else and grow with them. And I think it just takes the right people, whether that's a friendship or a romantic relationship. You just need to be with the right people to know what's going to work for you.
My oldest brother, who is my favorite brother out of five, and every one of them know it. My oldest brother taught me several years ago, and I don't know where you are as far as religion. I'm a Christian. It makes no difference to me where you sit with that. But he said, Nick, I want you to start praying every day for God to bring the right people across your path. Ask him to bring the people that need you just as much as you need them. And I've started praying that every day. Has the prayer been answered every day? No, but I can pinpoint, because you're right. It's a specific group of people that love you, and they're going to love you in spite of your disability. No matter what, they're just going to say, screw it, I'm along for the ride. You can't get away. You can't get away from me. You're stuck with me, just like you're stuck with that wheelchair. um
Mhm.
and that really has changed my life in so many different ways. Praying that every day and asking God to bring in the right people, to bring in the caregivers, and to know from my perspective as a man of faith that that's happened is so powerful. And I'm glad that you realize that too, that that having friends in the disabled community sadly is not for everybody. I think because they haven't been trained properly at home. That's just my personal opinion. But the fact that you realize that your group of friends are special because they accept you for you no matter what is incredible. And I really admire you for that. So,
Thank you. I appreciate that.
yeah, you're welcome. So, what was it like for you? Because I know there's some people with disabilities who are on these crazy dating apps, and I've given up on those about a year ago. Um, some people with disabilities, especially if it's physical, especially if they're in a wheelchair, they don't want to come out and say it right away. Um, on the dating apps that you were on, or however you did it, were you honest and upfront right away, or were you like, I'm going to talk to them for 2 or 3 months before before I say anything?
I have been upfront about my disability since day one, for multiple reasons, but I will say if they're going to accept my disability, they're either going to accept it from the beginning or they're not. And so, not only that, but I can't drive. And so, I might as well just be upfront and honest. I definitely had pictures while I was in my wheelchair. I had closer pictures where you couldn't tell, but I always made sure the first picture was me in a wheelchair, and so it was obvious. If there are people who are open to that, great. If they're not open to that, then they can move on. I I definitely wasn't trying to hide my disability in any way, although I wasn't super open and upfront about exactly what happened to me and exactly what I go through. It was still very obvious that I was in a wheelchair, and that was my main way to get around.
Yeah. Now, and that's good, and I'm glad you're upfront about it. Now, we kind of laughed about this a little bit yesterday. How long did it take for you to get messages because you were disabled and people asking you to basically be a sugar mama? Like, hey, I need $500 or I need $50 or
Yeah, I've definitely had my fair share of experiences, that's for sure. And I'm not one to want to deter people away from the dating apps, but I'm pretty sure anyone who's been on them knows that it can be rough out there. Um, I definitely had people reaching out the day that I decided to be on them again. Some people who did come across as genuine, and then other people who just wanted to ask for pictures of my feet or something crazy weird. It does happen. I've had my fair share of crazy experiences, but I do believe that there are good people out there. You
Yeah.
just have to find them.
But this is what I don't understand. I mean, hello, able bodied people. Disabled people are on Social Security. We either get one check, which is the cost of living adjustment, or we get both checks. And if we get both of those checks, which are the cost of living adjustment and the Social Security disability, which is either death benefits or from our parents' retirement, that doesn't mean we're rich. I mean,
Right.
I, I just, I mean, I was stupid a couple of years ago. I mean, I would be on these dating apps and people would ask me, guys would ask me, hey, I know that you're in a wheelchair, and because I was craving connection and craving physical reaction, to be honest, I'll be vague on that, but you know what I mean when I say physical. I'll say physical. And by the way, it's such a coincidence that you're in Columbus, Ohio. I just bought a house in Columbus, Ohio, and I'll be able to come see you all. Yeah, that's all lies.
Yeah, no, thank you. Not the person I would want to be involved with, that's for sure.
Yeah. So be very careful, disabled community, especially when you're out here on these apps, because it's craziness. So tell me, Aspen, what is your what's next for accessibility with Aspen Sage?
I just want to keep traveling. I would like to continue traveling as much as possible, but also I'm in the process of building a fully accessible tiny home. And so that's obviously a big part of my picture too. I would like to get that completed so I can move out of my parents' house and they can have their space back. And I would like to have my own space too for my service dog and my stuff and everything. I think I'm ready for that next step into my independence, and I'll be close by in case I need them, but continuing to travel and working with different travel companies and hopefully eventually getting my tiny home finished.
How long do you think that's going to take you to build?
So that's really hard to say. The struggle is being on disability and trying to build a house on a disability budget when I'm barely making ends with how things already are. Um,
Mm,
Realistically, I would like to be in it by the beginning of 2026. I'm not sure if that will happen. It would be great if it did, but I'm also just really learning patience while I wait for the build.
yeah, and I'm sure that you've learned patience as far as a person with a disability, because those of us who have to depend on somebody, we have to be patient whether we want to be patient or not. And
Right.
I've had people compliment me and say, Nick, when I grow up, I want to be just like you because you're so patient. And I'm like, really, I'm not. I'm forced to be because I have no choice. So
Yeah, I can relate to that.
yeah. So why don't you tell people where they can find accessibility with Aspen Sage? And we're also gonna put because you have a GoFundMe. Don't hate on those of us with disabilities who have GoFundMe. I have one too, and I could use your support just as well as my friend Aspen here. So support both of us as you can, and tell people where they can find you.
Yeah, so you can find me on most social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. I'm slowly growing on YouTube, and I also have a Substack for my blog as well. Pretty much all of my platforms have my link tree linked in them, and on my link tree has access to all of my platforms.
Okay, cool. And we'll put all those links in the show notes. I have all my guests send me their links and stuff. So we'll put all those links in the show notes along with your GoFundMe. Listen, please support her. Please support me. Please support anyone out there like me trying to make a better life for themselves. Because honestly, the government doesn't want us to. So we have to make it happen for ourselves. And unfortunately, we have to ask for help with that. And it's not because we don't want to get off our ass and get a job. We can't get off our ass and get a job. Okay? So before you say get off your ass and get a job, we can't. We want to, but we can't. And even those of us who are on our ass, we want a job, but we've been told we're unemployable because of our disability, aka me, which is why I'm here doing this podcast. Anyway, now I'm off my soapbox. But thank you so much, Aspen, for being here today. What are your final thoughts? Maybe somebody has just come through, God bless them, just came through a situation similar to yours. They were walking around, they were running, they were doing everything as normal as you were, and now they're disabled and they don't know what to do now. What are your words of wisdom to them?
I would just like to start by saying find your people, find your support system. It's definitely not an easy journey. It makes for a hard life when you go through something so tragic. But with the right people and with the right support system, you can be so incredibly happy and successful. And we all deserve that. So just don't ever give up. Don't give up and keep fighting for your dreams because they are possible.
Absolutely, they are. 110,000% they are possible. Thank you so much for being here today, Aspen. I really appreciate you telling your story. Stay right there for me. We're going to talk right off air. I just have some show promotion to do. You guys, this is the Nick Speaks podcast, the podcast dedicated to the disabled community where we speak up, speak out, and speak loud about the issues that matter to the disabled the most. If you have a story like Aspen's, or if you're in any part of the disabled community whatsoever and would like to come on the program, you can either contact my producer, Kyle Goodnight. His information will be in the show notes as well. Or you can contact me directly at nickspeaksofficial@gmail.com with the subject line, be a guest on your podcast. Before I go today, I want to take the opportunity to promote the book that I had the opportunity to be a part of, which is called Trailblazing and Transforming Entrepreneurial Stories of People with Disabilities. It's 12 entrepreneurial stories of people just like me and Aspen who've been rejected by the workforce simply just because of our disability. I'm chapter 5, Breaking the Mold. You can get it on Amazon, either in paperback or on your Kindle device. You do not have to have a Kindle device in order to get it. All you have to do is download the Kindle app on your phone, look up the name of the book, and you can get it right there. Also, we are working on an audio version. I hope to have something for you on that within the next couple podcasts, because I know I've been telling you guys that forever. But for now, please check that out. Trailblazing and Transforming Entrepreneur Stories and People with Disabilities. I hope that it'll be a blessing and an encouragement to you. And guys, please support my GoFundMe with my handicap accessible van, as well as helping pay for Kyle Goodnight's format podcasting, Kyle Goodnight's podcasting services. I would greatly appreciate it. It would help me for any future public speaking engagements as well. So if you could support me or Aspen and her GoFundMe, that would be great. This is the Nick Speaks podcast. I will see you guys next week. I'm your host, Nick Comstock. Have a good week. Bye-bye.